And while I bring on the next speaker, Ewere will be helping us to talk about cloud financials. How do you choose the right fitting cloud service provider that would help you as an organization to go on? Yeah, Ewere is quite a great guy. I see some few persons here who are already hyping him up. He's actually an interesting person. I would just want to read up a few things about Ewere just to set the tone for the next speaker. You'll be talking about cloud adoption also. We would be talking about cloud migration, cost optimization. You can see here that Ewere is the first AWS hero in Africa with over 6 years of experience working with AWS services, cloud migration strategies, and projects across various industries from advertising to identity and fintech. Ewere has educated and he has educated and also trained many fellow developers in AWS and DevOps practices, and is the co-founder of DevOps Nigeria. He's actually also the head of infrastructure and data protection officer at Indicina, a credit infrastructure company. And I would love to hand over right now to Ewere as he takes us on in his session. Ewere, over to you right now as you lead us in this session.
All right. Hi everyone. My name is Ewere. Thank you very much for the introduction. I'm also a WS Community Hero. On this session, I'll be talking about cloud adoption and financial management. Um, it's going to be a pretty tricky topic, but I'll be available to answer questions after this session. So a little bit of me personally. I've been in the industry for about 19 years. Started programming back in high school days. I've been a programmer for 13 years. Worked with languages like VB, PHP, HTML, CSS, and a bunch of programming languages, building desktop, web, mobile applications alike. I started my cloud and DevOps journey 6 years ago. I'm also the first AWS community here in Africa and Nigeria. Based on the community work I've been doing back here in Nigeria, which I'm still doing in Nigeria. And then I'm also the co-organizer of DevOps Nigeria, and I'm also a writer and a blogger. I have a blog in Medium, and I'm a father of two. Okay, so why cloud? I think that's the first question we're going to ask. This is a very controversial topic. I've been in sessions where people don't see why they want to use cloud. I mean, we'll be discussing some of these things subsequently, but I'll just break down some of the basic reasons why you should use cloud. I mean, everybody's talking about cloud computing, cloud computing, cloud computing. Someone asked me once, it's like, is there really? Are you telling me that this thing is in the sky? And there's a magazine by Oracle many years ago where they showed somebody plugging a computer to the sky. So there's so many myths and there's so many misconceptions. So, but for the sake of this conversation, I'm going to narrow down the reason for cloud to very basic reasons. Okay. Number one, it improves MVP time from months to weeks. So MVP is most viable product. So it's a term used by product managers a lot, and this is how you bootstrap a business. So for example, you have an idea, you say, okay, I want to build an app that can when I press a button on this application, it will put on a bulb in my house in the US. And I mean, with cloud computing, you can get this done in a matter of weeks. The kind of infrastructure you need to build that kind of system without cloud is going to be very expensive. It's going to be very almost impossible. I mean, 40 years ago, if you wanted to build this kind of thing, it's almost impossible. You have to contact huge vendors, you have to buy a lot of hardware, you have to employ a lot of people. But right now, I can tell you for sure that there are even already available systems that can do this for you. You don't even need to know anything about tech to be able to build this kind of system for an MVP presentation. So I mean, it cuts down MVP delivery from days to weeks. Okay, so from weeks to days. Okay, I wrote from months to weeks here, but sometimes it can even be days. Okay, just to test out something and prove that something can work. It reduces the cost of application infrastructure. This has been rehashed in this conversation by the two previous speakers, but I'm still going to go deeper into how this can be done. So basically, that's the goal of cloud. It's supposed to reduce the cost of your application infrastructure. If you want to, after building an application written in any language, PHP, Python, Node.js, Java, I don't want to know the language you use, Rust, for the Web3 guys and Golang, you need to put it somewhere. The cost of that environment is always a major issue for business leaders. Okay, but I'm here to explain how cloud can actually reduce that for you. And then we have low capex and optimal opex. So low capex, we're talking about capital expense. What does it cost to start up an application infrastructure? In the cloud, it's as easy as launching an instance. Okay, I don't want to say easy so much because there's still some background understanding you need to have. But the capital expense of having a server is quite low. Even if you want to buy a computer in Nigeria, you still need to take a stroll to Computer Village. Price with the item with the seller, make some arguments, before you get the purchase and before you take it back to your environment and get it set up. You think about power, you think about connectivity, you think about availability, you think about redundancy. All these are the capital expenses that go with setting up infrastructure yourself, which the cloud takes care of for you. And then you have optimal OPEX, which is operational expense. So what does it take to operate? Okay, so in the cloud, most of the things you do are virtual. So it's quite easy for you to manage and operate more easily than if you were managing it yourself. We talked about capital expense of setting up, but apart from setup, you still have to manage. Okay, the previous speaker talked about the price of diesel being a problem. That's an operational expense because you need to keep your infrastructure up and running 24/7. That's an operational expense that you will totally optimize in the cloud. It's not going to be eradicated. That's the truth. You still have operational expense. That is why companies hire infrastructure engineers, DevOps engineers to run the operational costs for them. Okay, but trust me, the people you hire when you are running on the cloud are less than people you hire when you are not on the cloud. Okay, and then you have variety in pricing point. I'm going to talk more about this very soon. Okay, the cloud is not as expensive as we all think every time. It's not. You have more choices and options than you could ever get, and then you have variation in deployment models. The previous speaker talked about containers, talked about Fargate as a method of deployment. There are so many options in the cloud that you can leverage. Total control of infrastructure cost. This is also a major fear for a lot of people. They're like, when you put something in the cloud, the cost will just go up, and we don't know where the cost came from. It comes from somewhere. Okay, because I've heard people call me and they're like, "Hi, I just launched this instance, and that's it. Before you know, I'm seeing $200 in my account. These people they are thieves. They are not thieves. It's not magic. Okay, there is a trick and there is a method to that. Okay, I've seen people who went straight to the AWS account and deleted that instance immediately because they didn't understand. Some people have deleted their instance and they still see costs raking up. How? We're going to answer some of those questions in this. And then the last thing is cost transparency. It's very measurable. It's very controllable. It is not out of your hands. That's what I would like to say. If there's anything you want to take out of this session, just know that your cloud cost is never out of your hands, because there's this perception, there's this concept that these cloud providers always look for your money. They don't look for your money. Trust me, they don't. They have enough already. But there is huge cost transparency, which I'll be digging deep into, explaining some of the strategies you can use to make sure that you can see what you are paying for. Okay, adoption strategy. For the cloud adoption, I want to talk more about a strategy that can help you to adopt cloud, instead of talking about what the adoption has been. The previous speakers have already talked about the fact that cloud adoption is huge globally. Okay, everybody knows that there's an adoption, but sometimes if you don't have a strategy in your organization, you see it as something far-fetched. Okay, so the first thing is solving and understanding billing options. I think a lot of companies do not pay attention to billing options in the cloud. They just hear the cloud, okay, AWS can do this, you can do recognition, you can do EC2, virtual machines, anything you want, you put on, you put off, it's not that straightforward. It's not that easy. Okay, you need to have understanding of what is available. Just like when you send a procurement officer to go out there to get requisition, you ask from 6 7 vendors. Okay, so when you are sitting down in front of the table of someone who wants to help you with cloud adoption or cloud migration or cloud strategy, the first question you need to understand is the available billing options in that environment. Okay, how it ties back to the budgeting, how it ties back to the company's organizational goal. You need to, that is like the first question you need to be very clear about. Free demo and compute storage and database requirements. Many of the cloud providers gives you an opportunity to play with the environment for a period. Okay, AWS has what we call free tier, which has been a problem for some people because it's like a trap. People see it as a trap because to some extent it is really hard to understand how those free tier work. But if you sit down to read the documentation, you will get an insight. So there are metrics and should I call it there are things you should not do when you're on free tier. Okay, there are services you should not use when you're on free tier. So what I notice is that people just go into free tier and they just want to enjoy everything, and then the bill starts coming in and they're like, whoa, these people lied to us. It's still free tier, and now they are giving me $200. I'm going to delete my AWS account. In short, I'll put a card that does not have money there. So this is just a common thing. But hey, the free demonstrations are there. Okay, they are supposed to help you to do basic stuff. So you need to look at the upper limits configurations. For example, if you want to launch an EC2 instance in AWS, there is a limit for the EBS volume, which is your hard disk or your storage. There's a limit for the instance type you should use for free tier. When you exceed that, you get billed. That's how it works. So for migration plan, you need to have a plan on how you want to migrate your systems, whether your systems are in another cloud provider or it is in an on-prem environment. In my previous place of work, we did a migration from Azure to AWS, and after researching on the migration plan, what I simply did was what we call the lift and shift. So a lift and shift was to move the virtual machine from Azure directly into AWS and dropped it, and everything started running within minutes. Okay, so you need to understand your migration plan. How are you going to migrate applications? What kind of applications do you have? The current environment you have, is it a plug and play environment? I found out that the environment from Azure to AWS was a plug and play system, so it was very easy for me to just do what we call lift and shift. There are other migration techniques that would require you to spend some time to understand how you can move your application very easily. And that's where things like containers come in, and that's what the previous speaker was talking about. And then we have TCO analysis, which is total cost of ownership. TCO talks about comparing more or less your on-prem costs with your cloud costs. Okay, I'm not able to go deep into TCO right now, but basically TCO takes note of every single thing around your environment. So electricity, connectivity, um, um, I mean, everything you need to run your infrastructure on premise, and then compare that with the cloud. So in the cloud, you obviously don't think about electricity, you don't think about connectivity, you just think about your accounts and what the cloud provider gives you. So you need to also compare that. I have met with people who want to do cloud, and I tell them you don't need to do cloud. Okay, there are scenarios where cloud does not fit. Okay, please, we don't need cloud every single time. There are scenarios where cloud does not fit. For example, you are building a very basic website that does basic stuff. I mean, if you go to the cloud, you are going to spend more than if you pay for a shared hosting. Okay, but hey, there are scenarios where cloud is just the best for you. There are scenarios where cloud might not be the best for you. Okay, so that's where TCO analysis helps a lot with answering that question. Okay, I mentioned deployment options in the previous slide, and I said that there are so many deployment options in the cloud. So I mentioned just a few of them. We have virtual machines, which in AWS we call EC2 instances. So there are various types of instances, and I'll say something that is unique here that you cannot get on premise. Now, AWS launched what we call the Graviton 3 processor in the last reInvent currently. That processor is a proprietary processor from Amazon. You will never see that processor anywhere else. And what makes this processor very powerful? First of all, it runs faster than any other Intel processor you're going to find in the market. Number two, it's cheaper. Number three, it has lower carbon footprint. And then number four, it reduces the cost of the infrastructure. So proprietary, highly researched technologies like that, you're not going to find them out of the box. Okay, and these are being delivered to you. The second one is the INF1 processors, which are designed for machine learning workload. We know that machine learning and AI are becoming the thing, but the truth is that the kind of processors we have right now, the Intel processors and the basic ARM processors, cannot process the kind of workload. They can't. They are a bit slower. We're also talking about global warming. So anything we're building now in terms of infrastructure has to think about carbon footprint first. Okay, so these are technologies that you will not find out of the box. You will never find them out of the box. Amazon bought a company in Israel that is into processors, and that's how they started building these Graviton processors. And we're in the third version of Graviton 3 processors. And trust me, I've used them, and trust me, the machine experience are very unique and different. We'll talk about the next thing here is managed database services. If you are used to the previous ways of setting up infrastructure, if you have a database, all you need to do is to install that database in a virtual machine and kneel down in front of that server and pray nothing happens. Okay, so in managed database services, you don't get that. You are guaranteed of the availability. You are guaranteed of backup. You are not guaranteed of security because it's your responsibility, because there's something we call shared responsibility model in the cloud. You need to make sure that you are in charge of your security. Please, this is something else I see as a myth out there where people feel, oh, I'm in the cloud, you go to bed. 4 years ago, a junior engineer in AWS pushed a deployment to S3 that made the S3 buckets to be publicly available. And everybody in the whole world was able to access buckets of some companies that contain sensitive data of a lot of people. Okay, so the security of your infrastructure generally, it's in your hands. So as you are studying the deployment options, you are studying the pricing options, you need to understand the security principles and practices to make sure that this are secure. Please, the fact that you're in the cloud doesn't mean you are secure. Please, let's be very careful of that. Okay, we need to also bring in security and understand how to secure our workloads in the cloud. The next deployment option we have here is containers. Previous colleague just talked about containers. I mean, I will talk much about containers because containers is a whole, huge topic of its own. But just see containers as a better way to package and distribute your application. Okay, a better way to package it in a form like a zip file. Okay, we know zip files very well. So if you want to give someone else a file that contains a lot of information, different files, image files, text files, what do? You zip it and give to someone. That's what a container is. If I want to deploy an application in any environment without thinking about if that environment has dependencies installed in it and all, I put it in the container and I ship it to anybody anywhere in the world. And then the person can also run that application without asking me, oh, what version of Node.js? What is it, Java 8 or Java 9? Which one should I install? Is it Node 14 or Node 13? Node 13 has this bug. Those conversations do not happen when you do go. Okay, there's a whole lot of information around containers. That's basically what containers do, and it's actually a model of deployment in cloud. Okay, that's why applications these days they will tell you cloud native. Cloud native means that it it conforms with cloud environment, because cloud environment have certain rules. Okay, there's something called the 12-factor rule. You can principles of designing a cloud native system. Okay, the next is machine learning. Amazon SageMaker is a powerful tool in terms of you can train, you can deploy, you can tune, yeah, you can train, you can deploy, you can tune, and then you can also deliver your machine learning models. The next here we have is serverless options. Serverless options have to do with when you deploy an application and you don't have to manage the server yourself. The difference between the virtual machine option and the serverless option is that servers yourself. It's another huge topic, but it's also available in the cloud. Okay, let's talk a little bit about cloud financials. Okay, I'll be talking a lot about AWS. So one of the things you notice in the cloud is that there are different pricing models. Okay, we have what we call compute pricing models and database pricing options, and then you have storage tiering options. Now, for compute pricing options, on the basic level, you have what we call on-demand pricing, you have the savings plan, and then the reserved instances. So I'm just going to elaborate on the compute pricing because it basically applies to compute and database. When we talk about compute, we're talking about virtual machines, serve as computers basically. So the on-demand says pay for what you use. If you start the server West African time, okay, it will cost you $0.02 per second to run that machine. So what we'll do is once you start at 9 a.m., by 5 p.m., we'll calculate 0.02 times the number of seconds till 5 p.m. and send that bill to you. That's on demand. Okay? I guess it's pretty straightforward. Pay as you go, just the way our airtime works in Nigeria. When you buy 200 naira, there's a cost per second. When you make a call, it continues to deduct your airtime until it gets to zero. That's how on demand works. Okay, it's just that one is prepaid, one is postpaid because for this you pay after consumption. Okay, savings plan is a new method of savings that AWS introduced as a plan to deprecate the reserved instances. I think so. Savings plan helps you to tell AWS, okay, for this server, I'm going to pay this amount of money. They can give you a range. Okay, I'm going to pay this amount of money for this month, for this period. You commit to it for a period with flexibility, and then you get a discount for that because you are committing to a long-term relationship with them. You also have what we call reserved instances, which is one of the cheapest form, cheaper than reserve. But before now, reserved instances is also a long. I'm going to use. How much does it cost? AWS say, okay, because you are committing, man, this server costs $100, but because you are committing for 1 year, we'll give you $40. Okay, so this method of pricing looks close. I was talking about billing options. Okay, I was explaining this kind of billing options already. Um, we have the on-demand billing, we have the long-term, which I already mentioned, 1 year or 3 years, and then we also have um, savings plan and reserve. And then the last one I didn't talk about was the consumption billing model. So how the consumption billing model works is that it is based on what you consume, and this is what serverless services like what we call Lambda functions use. And what this means is when you consume certain size of data, you get billed for it. Okay, so that's how the consumption model works. So one of the things about this is always, like I talked about initially, is how we can solve the problem of knowing what we are spending and being able to track what we are spending. So there are so many tools that can do that. I'll just mention a few of them here, and I'll stop it there. So the first thing we have is cost and billing management. So this is the dashboard that shows you basically what you are spending. Okay, what you are spending. It also has a projection of what you will pay at the end of the month. It also has a lot of features that shows you what you are spending in terms of your cost at the moment. The other tool I want to talk about here is Trusted Advisor. So Trusted Advisor is an AWS tool that helps you to understand where you might be spending too much, okay, and where you can save costs. Trusted Advisor does a lot for you in terms of application, your account security, your database account security, to tell you where you need to make sure you secure the account, like activating MFA for users, like ensuring that certain maybe firewalls or security groups are not exposed to the internet. But as part of the features Trusted Advisor has is costing, okay? It helps you to calculate cost and tells you where you can save money, like using reserved instances more and using other cost optimization services that exist. The next we have is infrastructure as code. This is one of the best ways of auditing and governing your infrastructure. The question you will ask is how. Now, infrastructure. And one thing we have been able to do is to optimize it to the best. How do we do that? Instead of going to the UI to click on what we want to do and say, okay, we want to create this particular resource for this customer, sorry, want to create this particular resource for this application, want to create this for this application. We don't do that. We write the application code, the infrastructure as code using Terraform and create the resource based on that using a CI/CD pipeline. Now, how does that make our work more efficient? The first thing it does for us is that when we are done with that infrastructure, we just need a single command to destroy that infrastructure. Okay. Now there are certain infrastructures that are connected to other services and other services and other services. When you do this from the UI, it is nearly impossible for you to track all these services. And that's where you see people tell you, oh, I just launched an instance and they are still billing me. Maybe that instance is connected to a VPC. Maybe that instance is connected to a DynamoDB. Maybe that instance is connected to some other service that you cannot remember that you set it up yourself. Okay, but if you write it as an infrastructure as code, as a Terraform code script or you destroy that infrastructure with that code, it destroys every connecting service and system to it as a single whole entity, infrastructure and entity. So it is very easy to manage, audit, and govern. Lastly, from and it can also make it very, very it can also make it very sorry about that. It can also make it very easy for you to know what is going on. Okay. Last thing I want to talk about is just to summarize everything I'm talking about, the myth versus the truth of the cloud. So one of them is cloud does not give you control. That's just a myth. That's not the truth. You kind of have options in the cloud for virtual machines with root access, and you also have dedicated bare metal machines. So if you are in the compliance space where you are told you cannot share network, you cannot share because obviously cloud is a shared resource. Okay, they tell you that because of compliance, you're in the telecommunications business, you cannot share resource with anybody in the cloud. You can pay for dedicated bare metal systems. I mean, almost every cloud provider supports that, I think. I know AWS supports that, but I don't know about other cloud providers. The other myth is that cloud is expensive. Cloud is determined by pricing model you choose. I mean, I already spoke about that just now. If you set up an infrastructure and you forget it and you get billed, that doesn't mean cloud is expensive. Okay. It just means that your practices, you need to change your practices of how you use and manage the cloud. Okay. The next is cloud. I heard a couple of years ago, and trust me, cloud opens you up to more than just the UI. Okay. You need to understand the practices of the cloud. So it's not just about you can create a server, you can create a network, you can create, it goes more than that. Okay. You need to also understand programming and automation. I just talked about Terraform. Terraform is a language of its own called the HashiCorp compute language. You need to understand how it works. You need to write Terraform script. You need to debug. You need to even integrate Terraform with other languages like Bash, like Python, So you learn more things. And to add to that, if you don't have a lot of foundation in networking, storage, compute, administration, you won't even be able to do the cloud. So I wonder how it makes you a lazy engineer. Okay. And the cloud is about storage. You hear people tell you, oh, I'm storing it in the cloud. Please, cloud is not storage. Cloud is just a logical construct of computing and power on demand. Okay. It's just a concept. The name cloud is just a conceptualized name that makes you understand that it is something somewhere where you can have storage on demand. I mean, the first speaker was talking about how he was able to increase his storage from one to the other. That's storage on demand. He's able to get it. Okay. And then he also talked about how you can scale. That is also computer power on demand. You don't have to think about the cost. You don't have to think about the capital expense of acquiring more resources. Thank you. Thank you very much. You can check out my book on infrastructure monitoring with Amazon CloudWatch. It's a very wonderful book and book that can help you understand monitoring from the ground up. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much, Ewere. That was quite an insightful session. I believe that you took us through a robust journey on how we can leverage on the cloud, and also the fact that we do not really need to fear as regards cost. One thing you said that really stuck with me is that it is not out of our hands. It is also controllable.